Hey, what up, Long Beach? Welcome back to your home for everything local sports. This episode of Long Beach Sports Talk brought to you by the Press Telegram and Gazette newspapers and sponsored by Naples Rib Company, the best ribs around. It is heating up here in the local area, literally and figuratively, because we're talking playoffs.
Is it not mid-November right now?
Playoffs?
Very confusing.
We've got football, we've got volleyball, we're even talking some Long Beach State basketball in there. This, the only place in the city to talk local sports, and as always, the three amigos bringing it to you. I am sports editor JJ Fiddler, to my right.
Sports editor Mike Gardabasio, and the half amigo that makes us the 3.5 amigos, Vincent the sports baby, soundly napping in the other room, which hopefully will continue. And to my right,
Tyler Hendrickson. I got some grown man game for you, Bluetooth. And yeah, usually Vincent's here tableside, but we're enjoying the fact that he's in there getting the naps in, and I am usually the king of napping.
True. You've got the throne back at this table right now.
Respect.
Well, this is not the time to be napping for local sports writers, because it is a busy time of the season.
He's a baby, JJ.
Oh, well, fair enough. What
We
can
just hired him,
what
and he's
can we
already
expect?
napping on the job.
What can we expect? But like I said, football, volleyball, everything else, local sports coming at you in this episode. You've got to get on Twitter right now if you're not already following us, because if you can't get to those games, and you can't get to all of them, we've got you updated with the scores, sometimes even live when we're there, to let you know what you're missing or what games you should be looking for on the coverage on GazetteSports.com and in the Press Telegram. "12 teams, 5 brackets, 1 goal. They got to pick up that plaque at the end of the road, and everybody wants to do it, and it's not easy. And we've got 12 groups of young men who are trying to get there, trying to reach that championship peak."
What are you, a poet now?
I know. I'm all fired up. I didn't realize JJ was working for NFL Network covering high school sports. But no, you're absolutely right. In fact, we know for a fact that not everyone gets to do it because many of the teams that we're covering are in the same bracket. So Poly and Bosco, I don't want to know of a world where they can both hoist the championship plaque. But I will say, it looks like the Jackrabbits probably, maybe of all the teams we cover who are seeded in that top 4, definitely with the hardest road to start, as they'll open up at home against Orange Lutheran, which I think is kind of the game everyone's been talking about, at least on my radar.
Well, that's got to be the game of the first round. I think there's a lot of interest. It's, a relatively even matchup, which you don't expect to see for a seeded team in the first round. But because the Pac-5 is so good and the way the draw worked out, Jackrabbits get a real tough test. And it's a matchup that brings a lot of recent interest, does it not?
Well, the Lancers are an at-large team, but they are no joke. I mean, they lost to Servite on a Hail Mary. They gave St. John Bosco a hell of a game when they played them, and we know how good that Bosco defense is. So the triple option, or the fake, now find the ball offense that the Olu runs is tough. But I think if I were to pick a defensive coordinator to try to figure that whole thing out, Jeff Turley would be towards the top of that list.
I think what makes their wrinkle a little bit different than a lot of triple option things is that they will throw the ball, and they do have a receiver on that far side who, if even one time you sort of fall asleep on him over there, he will burn you. So that's kind of what makes it interesting. If you're an Air Force fan, and by that I mean if you're a fan of the Air Force football team, not just a fan of the Big Plains
Academy,
or the Academy itself, it's familiar to you because it's actually a former coach of Air Force who is the coach of Orange Lutheran, which would be nice to see. A move from college to high school like that in Long Beach, I don't think we can count on it happening anytime soon. Detail-oriented team, very disciplined. They do run that triple option with the Air Force wrinkles. And you're right, Jeff Turley obviously has spent a lot of time looking at these kinds of offenses. They defended the double wing very well against Bakersfield. We used to have a couple teams in the Moore League that would run that offense. So they've got to put time in because it's I made the joke with one of the linebackers at practice yesterday. It's a little like doing homework, right? It's not really football the way that you normally think of, we're going to go out and make plays. It's like, I'm going to stay in this spot every play, even if nothing happens.
Well, and it brings some interesting strategies when you prepare for an offense that's this unique, and there's certain ways that you can try to prepare for it and hope to attack it. And Mike, you've been at practice to kind of see it firsthand, and what's kind of one of the tricks that Poly's been using?
Well, the best trick, and I think Turley, I always think this is a really smart thing, is you just assume that a couple guys are going to get fooled every play. So what you do is you say, we're literally going to scout this thing with no ball, and all of the potential ball carriers on every play have to be wrapped up. every receiver has to be covered, because that way, okay, so even if the middle linebacker gets wrong on who's getting the ball, it shouldn't matter, because everyone's got a responsibility of who they're supposed to take care of on every play, which kind of eliminates that guesswork a little bit. Very smart. I like that a lot.
Well, and I think that's the key word, is responsibility. You have to stay home when you're defending these type of offenses. You can't guess or peek into the backfield or anything like that. You just got to stick to what your assignment is and get it done. And the Jackrabbits have historically been very good at doing that, and Turley is a big reason why.
Well, the horse is very, very far out of the barn as it comes to the draw here and who's playing who. But it needs to be mentioned that this is one of the games you would call a tenderizing game, because it's coming early in the bracket and it's going to be very physical. Obviously, two teams, they want to control the ball and want to run the ball. And we're not just saying that because we think that's what's going to happen. That's just kind of what happens when Poly and Olu play in the CIF playoffs.
You're referring to, I think, Tyler and I would both say maybe our favorite football game we ever watched. Certainly one of the most unique. They still show the thing on Fox Sports. Poly Orange Lutheran CIF semifinal game in 2007 that Poly won 2-0.
Literally the lowest possible scoring game ever. And we can't get lower than that.
Worth pointing out every time I mention that game, in case there's people out there who didn't hear about it, you had, I think, a total of 8 or 9 Division I athletes on those two offenses. So you are not talking about two defenses that just couldn't move the ball whatsoever. You're talking about two great defenses who are playing absolutely outside of themselves. And almost a shame someone had to lose that game. We may have another one of those kind of contests ahead for us on Friday.
And it wasn't in a hailstorm or anything. It wasn't like they were playing in a mud bucket.
No.
You know, it was like decent field conditions. There wasn't like out extenuating circumstances.
They weren't playing on turf either, but you're right. They certainly weren't knee-deep in mud and unable to.
It wasn't Edison Servite CIF final of a few years ago.
Yes.
Well, and it's worth noting, I mean, a couple of goal line stands in that game and just phenomenal work. That Jackrabbit defense was amazing. You know, you shout out some of the linebackers, Kenny Tuiloma, Matt Jones, George Daly-Lyles, Jarrell Casey was on the line. Herman Davidson was the one with the big fumble recovery at the end of that game that sealed it when all Olu needed was a field goal there at the end. So the Lancers have kind of been waiting for their chance to get redemption against the Jackrabbits as a program. And, it's just, these teams haven't played a bunch, but there's just something special that happens when these two teams have played. And we've seen it the last 2 times, and we're expecting something special at Vets on Friday.
Schedule update, Mike?
It is going to be 7 p.m. at Vets. The default time for CIF playoff games is 7:30. It'll be 7 p.m. at Vets. Poly Orange Lutheran. We'll be there. I hope to see you there. It's certainly going to be a big game. I'm not even going to mention any other way you could watch the game, because you should definitely buy a ticket and get to that one.
It's going to be a scene at Vets. It's also going to be a scene at St. John Bosco High School, where the Braves, #1 seed in this bracket, are going to be taking on the Agora Chargers out of the Marmonte League. Agora 6-4 overall. They've lost 2 out of the last 3 games, though. They were actually looking to get one of those automatic bids heading in. Their senior quarterback, Jack Barmas. He's 64% passing this year with 2,000-plus yards, 21 TDs, and only 5 interceptions. So I know we've talked a lot about how that Bosco defense has really come into its own as the season got longer. I mean, look what they did against Mater Dei. But we have yet to see them take on a really, really effective, big-armed quarterback since taking on Chandler, and Chandler gave them a run for their money in that game down to Mission Viejo in that showcase very early on in the season. Now, eventually, St. John Bosco was able to, I guess, lean on them, I should say.
They turned it on.
They leaned on them pretty hard, and when you've got a guy like Damian Mama on the line, leaning on somebody can be uncomfortable, to say the least. But they're going to have to see a big-armed quarterback there. Key for Bosco is to get out healthy, though. They got to get out healthy, and they got to feel good going to the next one. If Long Beach Poly's playing a tenderizing game, I don't know what the opposite of tenderizing is.
It's a fortifying game, I guess you'd say. But yeah, I mean, typically the 1 seed versus the last team to get into the bracket is a 60 or 70 point game in the Pac-5. And I mean, in all fairness, the Agora Chargers probably have about as good a shot with the San Diego Chargers as they do with the Braves on Friday.
Oh my!
Bosco, it will be be seen at the scene, because it's going to be up and rowdy there for their 2013 run at a championship.
And the matchup next to that, right below, is the Cabrillo Jaguars going on the road to take on Tesoro. Now, we talked about this being a good draw for Cabrillo to use their athletes, go on the road, and get a huge playoff win. They've gone in as one of the bottom teams the last couple years. Jason Brown, as a head coach, has made the playoffs all 3 years at Cabrillo. This is the first time they've been the number 2 team out of the Moore League. And if they can be healthy, you know, they've had a couple injuries with Rashid Johnson, who's going to UW, the wide receiver, along with lineman Jacob Hines. So if those guys can be kind of healthy and can contribute, they've got the athletes to maybe, you know, make some noise against Tesoro.
Well, isn't that always the story of Long Beach teams in the playoffs going down to South Orange County? You depend on that athletic ability that can maybe run around some fundamentally sound defenses. We will have to wait and see, but we will have a highlight video of that game. So, you know, stay off the freeways on Friday night. We got you. Last team locally, Moore League, in the Pac-5, is Lakewood taking on Alemany, the Warriors out of the Mission Hills area, Sarah League. Alemany lost to Loyola 31-20 a few weeks after Loyola gave Lakewood the business in their home opener, if you're looking as a common opponents there. But common opponent is the guy who lined up on the other side. Mike, you and I covered this game back in 2010. A loss for the Lakewood Lancers at home in the second round of the playoffs, trying to get back to the semifinals for the third year straight. That ended up being Thad McNeil's last year for the Lakewood Lancers.
His last game with the Lakewood Lancers, absolutely.
And since then, a couple quarterback changes, couple head coaching changes, a lot of scheme changes. This senior group for the Lakewood Lancers has been through a lot. So it'll be interesting to see what they bring to the field on Friday, kind of as a swan song for a very turbulent ride.
But it is worth noting, if you're looking at the quality of draw for everyone, Alemany would be one of the softer 4 seeds that we've seen in the Pac-5 in a while. That's not to say that they're not a quality team, but keep in mind they were not ranked in the top 4 until this week. This is the first time because of that Westlake Oaks game kind of mixed things up. So Alemany could be vulnerable, if not against Lakewood, maybe still in the early rounds. We might not necessarily see them get all the way to the semis against Bosco.
Well, and if the Pac-5 playoffs have taught us anything, it's to take nothing for granted. We've seen upsets. We've seen, you know, a team that started 1-3 win the championship last year. So you just gotta show up to the games, follow our coverage, and figure out what's going to happen, because we are going to have to reset after week 1. But we know one thing: it will be entertaining, it will be fun, and there's going to be some good football in this Pac-5 bracket.
If the Pac-5 is the marquee bracket, then the Southeast is the
Long Beach and its suburbs bracket, because we cover, I mean, literally 6 of the 8 first-round games in the Southeast Division feature one of the schools that the Press Telegram covers.
It's crazy. The top of the list there, Norwalk, the number 1 seed in the bracket, going to be taking on West Covina. Norwalk played some close games down the stretch, but they were able to finish their season unblemished, take that Suburban League title, and now hopefully rolling some momentum into the playoffs.
They're 10-0, trying to go 14-0, and obviously in any playoff bracket, whether it's the Pac-5 or the Southeast, that's never easy to do.
Well, and they're coming in. Their star player, Rashad Penny, was injured a little bit in the last game. I was out at practice the other day. He wasn't practicing. He's keeping it light this week, but he's going to practice today. Be wearing a brace, just a knee bruise. He says he feels fine. He'll obviously be ready to go for these games. They've been protecting him. We've talked about the limited workload for Penny this whole season, and so the Lancers looking good. They will be at La Mirada. That game's not going to be at Excelsior. They're going to be playing at La Mirada High at 7:30 on Friday, hosting West Covina. They actually played one of West Covina's league mates in a Diamond Bar and won 48-10, which is obviously pretty impressive. That was early in the season, but during the time where the Lancers were just rolling over everyone. But I think it's good. These last couple games, they felt like playoff games. You know, they've come right down to the wire, and they've had to clutch up both their necks and pull out some wins, and that's kind of what you have to do in November and December.
Well, it's good to have to do that in November before you have to do it in December, right? Getting those games that are close, finding yourself in those situations, really knowing what your team's made of. Dominguez was in a few of those games this year. Not because they were meant to be close games, but when, you don't throw the ball at all, the games end up being a little bit closer than normal. Dominguez going to be at home taking on El Rancho.
Well, we always want good things for the local teams we cover, since those are the stories we know and the stories we like writing, but we're maybe giving a little extra positive energy to Norwalk and Dominguez this week, because if they both win, they play in the second round in the quarterfinals. And given that neither team passes the ball, what did you put the over/under at on game time there? About 68 minutes, probably.
Yeah, we're thinking under 75 minutes, pure game time, not counting the halftime break, and we're also thinking over/under passing attempts, 4.5.
Maybe. Vincent, the sports baby, would agree. He's awoken from his slumber. One squeak for over, 2 squeaks for under.
Oh, we're taking him to Vegas. Paramount going to be on the road, also from the San Gabriel Valley League. They're going to be at Los Altos, and La Mirada from the Suburban League is going to be at Muir. So those 2 tough road games for those 2 teams that are coming in kind of at the bottom of their league automatic bids, while the first place Downey team, who won that draw, if you want to say, like coin flip / tiebreak / draw against Paramount and Dominguez to be the number 1 seed coming out of that San Gabriel Valley League. They're going to be hosting Diamond Bar at 7 p.m. on Friday at home.
Well, and that's fair. I mean, they were the defending CIF champions in this division.
But it could have been any other way.
It could have been. They could have been down at the 3, but Downey has really, they struggled in the early going with injuries and different problems, but they've really started to get things going, and they're playing that aforementioned Diamond Bar team that Norwalk took care of early in the season. So we will see if the Vikings can carry over some momentum and defend themselves as champions. And oh my goodness, you hate to go this far ahead, but Norwalk Downey on opposite sides of the bracket. Downey knocked Norwalk out of the playoffs last year in a very close game. Man, you project this bracket and it just looks like it could be so much dang fun.
Yeah, and you've got Mayfair at Burbank, too, just to mention the Monsoons, who are as hot as anybody in this bracket right now, maybe not counting Norwalk.
They're a hard team to figure out for sure, but yeah, well, how sweet would a Bosco, Poly, Norwalk, Downey pair of CIF championships?
Don't even do it to me. Don't even do it to me. You're going to get my heart racing right now.
Let's make sure we get them all in down there in the southwest bracket. Los Alamitos going to have to travel to Foothill. They were playing Fountain Valley in the regular season finale with a chance to get a 4 seed and a share of the Sunset League title. They lose that game. They end up being an at-large team, and they have to go on the road for the first round at Foothill. I've seen this team a couple times. I really can't figure them out, especially offensive identity-wise. I'm just really not sure. This is not the time when you need to be figuring out your identity, but they do have a lot of playmakers on defense. And if we know anything about winning playoff games on the road, it takes a few big plays from your defense. They've got guys to make that happen. So maybe they can make some noise there on the road and then hopefully play a second-round game at home at Betts.
Well, speaking of on the road, St. Anthony has got quite a trip ahead of them, JJ, going out to Palmdale. I mean,
come back to me.
It's tough. They've got to get on the bus.
Moms to my TL.
They've got to get on the bus like before lunch starts on Friday to make it out there on time. I made it out to practice last night. Talked to head coach Mario Morales, and he was saying they're going to try to get out a little early and eat out there, and then kind of get their footing before getting on there for early outs at like 5:15 or something. But I asked him because, I mean, Mario's been around. Mario's been around football for quite some time. So if anybody's going to know how to travel, I mean, how many coaches have we talked to after long travel games that are like, I shouldn't have let the kids sleep on the bus?
Right.
You know, there's so many things that you think back to. So hopefully they've got the right plan. But you're talking about a St. Anthony football program that hasn't made the playoffs since 2008. So all of these kids who are now kind of with the rising tide of that school and that football program, none of them have played in the playoffs before. So I talked to the quarterback, Jake Cooper, and guess who he talked to this weekend to try to figure out what it takes to win playoff games?
B.I. Mays.
B.I. Mays, dude. What a perfect time for St. Anthony Hall of Fame inductions for these kids to be able to talk to some of the old, great Saints. You can read more about that conversation with Jake and what the St. Anthony Saints are looking forward to in the Press Telegram today. But, God, that's perfect timing. He was actually one of the kids who had to do the homework on Jack Snow. To learn. So all of these kids at St. Anthony are learning about the history of St. Anthony as they write their own history. Very special week for the Saints.
That's B-I-mazing is what that is.
Finally, in the last bracket, the fifth bracket, but not the least bracket, Avalon going to be taking on Mojave in the 8-man Division I bracket. So if you're, find yourself on a ferry early Friday, just head over to Catalina. You can check out those Avalon Lancers.
Joe Machado Field, there's nothing like it when they welcome in a team to the unfriendly confines on the island after a long boat ride. And Mojave, I mean, that's a long boat ride and a long bus ride to get to the boat. Actually, I think it was the LA Times. People were talking about that. It's one of the longest trips any teams had to make. Avalon needs that advantage because Mojave is undefeated and the top seed in that bracket. So they're hoping that they feel a little rusty by the time they get out on the field at Joe Machado.
I know we always mention Twitter, but this is the week that you need to put your follow where your mouth is. Get to Twitter right now and follow PT Gazette Sports because on Friday night, you can't be everywhere. But we might be. I know we record this on Wednesday, but Thursday is bowl night. Long Beach State back in the Walter Pyramid taking on LMU, 7 o'clock tip-off. Long Beach State coming off the homecoming win on Saturday and the cold shooting loss at number 5 Arizona on Monday. But I think the two things that we've come out of this early season for this Long Beach State 49er team that had so many question marks coming in is, one, Mike Caffey's pretty good, and two, these other guys could be pretty good too, but they're not there yet.
But I was going to say the two things we learned is Mike Caffey's pretty good, and the rest of the team isn't really that good yet.
Not yet, but I think you can all agree that the statistics that you want to see concerning effort and team cohesiveness and just overall defense, they're there. They need to improve, obviously, but they're there.
Well, and let's shout out the Slim Thump, right? Because Dan Jennings has been very good the first few games of the season.
The medium thump.
Yeah, the have you lost weight thump. He's really, his rebounding has been very good.
CrossFit thump.
Mike's losing it. But I think that inside-out presence has been very good, especially from your senior leaders that can lead by example with some of these young guys. And we've known that this was going to be a work in progress.
Oh, yeah.
Dan Munson said it in the preseason. And they still, of course, have Tyler Lamb that will join this team later. So don't get too caught up in the, oh, man, they really lost to Arizona bad.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Well,
Well, they were good. I mean, that's a body bag game.
Hey, I got Arizona as number 1 in the West bracket right now.
Well, I mean, the line for that game was 20.5. It's just it's not a game even in your best case scenario. Even when Dan Munson talked about the game before the season, he wasn't saying like he was saying the last couple of years. He wasn't like, oh, hopefully we can go give Arizona a run for their money. It's a game that you play. It helps pay the bills, but it is what it is.
So now they go home and they take on LMU tonight, like I said, 7 o'clock in the mid. These are the games, like Tyler just said, that's your measuring stick, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's what he called the game last year at LMU, was a measuring stick, because it was the first time in a long time without 4 returners starting and knowing exactly what you were going to have on the floor. Long Beach State ended up holding on to a 73-70 win at LMU last year, where Mike Caffey led the team with 15 points. He had 10 of those in the second half to help close the door. Then junior Chris Gully also chipped in 10 rebounds and 12 points. LMU guard Anthony Ireland is back. He's had an interesting season so far. You can read more about that in the calendar on GazetteSports.com. But last year, the Long Beach defense was able to hold the star guard to only 4 field goals and 9 points. He did dish out a team-high, game-high 8 assists. But if you only score 9 points in a game and you're the leading scorer of the team, chances are you're not going to win that game. So Long Beach hopes to be able to shut down number 3 again tonight in the mid.
Well, and then I think that there's certainly an advantage inside that they can take up with Herbalife Thump rocking in the paint. So the 49ers looking to come out, pound the ball, and you're right, that Caffey matchup is going to be very interesting.
Well, and some recruiting notes for both of these teams. LMU just got a big commitment from Compton senior point guard Kyron Cartwright, and Long Beach State just got a commitment on signing day, just a commitment for now, from Corona Centennial guard, which is where Mike Caffey played, and former Jordan High guard Deontay North.
Which is where Larry Anderson played.
So it's pretty exciting. So some local flavor. You might see both those guys in the mid. Hopefully you do. And those are some of our favorite kids to cover. And we'll be seeing them a lot more in the local hoop scene.
Ball night.
But football and basketball aren't the only sports that are going on right now, obviously. We've actually been spending more time in the last week covering high school playoff volleyball now that the CIF brackets have gotten going. If you're listening to this on Thursday, then tonight will be the second round of the playoff bracket, and we still have a number of teams alive, all of whom we are excited to get out there and go see. You can go check them out as well, obviously. We'll have full previews up on the website. But maybe Jade, you and I can just talk about the games we're going to go see.
Well,
you've got to me the game that I really wish I could go see.
Well, yeah, let's just say there are a lot of teams still alive. Not as many as there were on Tuesday, though.
No, but certainly not. But the teams that are alive are very strong.
Right, definitely. Remember when we were saying earlier about leagues being close, not having playoff success, and then leagues that are kind of a runaway have good playoff success? Well, Lakewood ran away with the Moore League and swept their way to the second round, and they're playing at San Clemente, which is the game you're talking about, that we'll have a video and full report from. Because if the Lancers are going to end up facing Los Alamitos in that semifinal, they're on the same side of the bracket. The Lancers had some trouble with the top-seeded Griffins this year. But the first step is to win a road game, right? The series doesn't start until a road team wins. Well, the bracket doesn't start for a team until you win on the road.
Well, what we always talk about, we talked about this with the 2010 Poly team that won the CIF championship, is Lakewood is built, I would actually say, more than Los Al for the way that this schedule is. Remember, the girls volleyball bracket, to win a championship, it's 5 matches, and it happens fast. It's 2 weeks. It's less than 14 days from when the brackets come out to when the championship game is held. So you play on Tuesday, Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, you find out who you're playing. Then you play that team on Thursday. Thursday night or Friday morning, you find out who you're playing in the quarterfinals. Then you play the team on Saturday. The reason I say Lakewood might have a better constructed team for that is they've got 3 hitters. And it's a lot harder to come up with a game plan to smother the whole front of the net. You basically have to study their setter, try and learn any tells that she's got as to where the ball's going. Los Al walks in the gym, you see Chrissy Jones, and you go, we should definitely step in front of her. Now, Los Al does have other weapons.
Yeah,
but I think
she's pretty good.
She's pretty good. But I think the difference is that there's less drop-off from Lakewood's best weapon in terms of the things that she can do to their other couple weapons. And Los Al arguably has, a higher overall talent level at hitters. At the pin hitters.
And they also have seniors at those positions, whereas the Lakewood Lancers are all juniors.
Well, and let's be honest, if it comes down to that matchup, they say it's hard to beat, a good team twice, much less 3 times, but Los Al will have the advantage because they'll know Lakewood. Because they've played them twice, so no surprises. They'll know how to prepare.
Know each other too. They're all club teammates and everything else. Yeah,
no doubt. So it'll be interesting. Does Lakewood have the advantage because it's hard to beat them 3 times, or does Los Al?
I always hate that it's hard to beat a team 3 times.
But it's true.
I understand that, but it's only true because
it's hard to beat them the second time as well.
Yeah, but it's but if you beat them 2 times, I think you can definitively say that the evidence indicates you're a better team. We said that because I remember when Poly played Redondo Union in that 2010 year in the CIF championship, and then in the state semifinal, we were like, hard to beat a good team twice, and as the matches laid out, it was like, but Poly was a better team, so they did.
Yeah, but it was much closer in that state than it was in the CIF championship.
And that was at home at Poly, as opposed to the championship, which was a neutral site. Anyways,
we'd also be remiss if we didn't mention Norwalk, the Lancers, the lone surviving team from the Suburban and the SGVL. They had a sweep over Eastside as they couldn't just...
Yeah, no Eastside comeback.
The East Siders couldn't come back. So the Lancers are trying to keep things rolling, and they've really been peaking towards the playoffs. Another team to watch here in the local area.
Los Alamitos making the long drive to Temecula to take on the mighty Pumas of Chaparral High School. And so we'll have reports from those games, but the games that are local that you can get to are actually going to be pretty interesting too. And we have highlight videos of those 2 teams already, because they were at home on Tuesday night as well. Wilson taking a 5-set thriller from Notre Dame Academy, and St. Anthony getting back on the playoff trail a year after setting some school history.
It was very exciting. They played Archer, which is arguably the funniest high school on television right now.
It would be as if someone played Simpsons High School.
Well, if someone ever plays Simpson High School, JJ, you're going to have to yank that microphone away.
10-minute highlight.
At least. I will go through my top 100 Simpsons references if we get that matchup. But anyway, yeah, a big win for St. Anthony, a sweep. What we were mentioning, we've got 7 teams alive, but the majority of them are seeded. I mean, Lakewood's seeded, Los Al is seeded, obviously tops overall. St. Anthony is seeded, and Avalon is seeded, actually number 3 in that lower bracket. So we've got teams that could certainly make a run to the semifinals or even the championship. And like we said, you'll know within a week whether or not they get there, because actually next Tuesday is the semifinals.
Yeah, if you're watching this video and you want to see more girls volleyball, check out that St. Anthony highlight video as well as the Wilson highlight video, where sophomore Milan Stokes had what was, I think, a playoff coming out party. I think we have yet to see the best from her, and she was pretty darn good on Tuesday night. All that girls volleyball coverage, playoffs and otherwise, right here.
Last night in Long Beach at the Convention Center, a big night for the black and gold as Long Beach State had another class to their Hall of Fame, and there was a big headliner from one of the former dirtbags, Troy Tulowitzki, as he dropped the quiche there at the Hall of Fame.
Well, yeah, Long Beach State has been waiting for a big pile, as it were, to try to get on top of this Blair Field renovation, and they got it from one of the better dirtbags in recent years.
I'd say at this point, you now have to consider him. He's a Hall of Famer. He's essentially, I mean,
I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer yet. No,
He's a Long Beach.
I'm just joking. That's what you say about Hall of Famers in baseball at all times. So.
Right. Well, no, I meant he's
I got
officially
you, I
in
got
the
you.
university's Hall of Fame, and now with $1 million, you'd have to start moving him up the list of greatest dirtbags ever. Which I guess that's a separate, very long conversation. But we have a lot of professional athletes come out of Long Beach, and you do not write these stories enough. Is I guess what I would say.
Amen.
I was very impressed by that. Obviously, Tulo's a guy where he's not making veterans minimum. You know what I mean? Like he's certainly a guy who can afford to give some cash. But just $1 million straight out handed to the university. I mean, I think they've only had one or two other times in history.
Well, yeah,
a bigger donation.
and one of those other donations was an anonymous donation, as you so famously can see on the Circle of Directors wall there.
And the other
in
one
the Walter
got
Pyramid.
the Walter's name on the pyramid.
That's what I was gonna say. And the other one is big and blue, and you can see it if you drive down Atherton or most cities in Long Beach.
Well, and it's worth noting because it's easy for people to just be like, well, yeah, look how much money he makes. Of course he should give $1 million to Long Beach State. But it's like, man, that is a lot of money.
Well,
you know what I mean?
and
That's
it's
a
not like
lot
he
of
stayed
money.
here for 4 years and had this incredible college experience. That's not how college baseball players are.
Wait, here's what I would say. Does anyone know off the top of their head what Tulo made this year? 20 million?
It's
Close to 20,
It's
yeah.
up there, yeah. I think it
so
was north of 25.
Anyone who
actually.
didn't give 1/20th of their salary to Long Beach State this year cannot poo-poo $1 million from Troy Tulowitzki. I don't care that it leaves him with $19 million and it would leave you with less than that. Well, that's a huge percentage of your large income to give back to a school, which, like you said, JJ, I mean, this is not like the high school that he and his dad and his grandpa all went to. This is a school he attended and then got out. I mean, and he's still really, really, really impressed me by making this donation.
Yeah, it was actually only 10 this year. He's got an escalating sliding scale contract, and it's guaranteed money into the future. But that's not important. It's just there's a lot of, like you said, Mike, there's a lot of professional athletes that come out. And, any time that they give
Evan
back...
Longoria has not announced $1 million donation to Long Beach State.
But Evan
There's a
Longoria
lot
went
of
to
guys.
junior college before he came to Long Beach
just
State.
saying
So
there's
that's what I'm saying about the baseball aspect of the thing,
Right.
which makes, to me, the donation that much more impressive.
I'm just saying there's a lot of pro athletes that have come out of that school, and you do not hear about donations like that very often. And actually, I would even, it's probably a bigger deal at our high schools, because you have much bigger athletes come out of the high schools that we cover. I haven't read about $1 million donation to Long Beach Poly football. And there's a lot of millionaires that have come out of that team. Now, Mercedes Lewis has been great at giving money and hosting his event there every year, but he's really, you don't see Willie McGinnis building an athletic facility at Long Beach Poly. You don't see Deshaun Jackson paying to have the dirt track redone so that the next generation of track stars upgrade. Tulo has done that with Blair Field. This will have a huge impact on their plans to renovate Blair Field, which obviously will have a huge impact on our high school kids as well.
Well, I think the point we're trying to make here is never take this type of stuff for granted and celebrate it, because it is something that not everyone does.
Right.
And so for Tulo to go out of his way to give that much money and to give back to the university, that's really just a great move by him, and it's something that we would love to see from all the other great athletes that we have coming out of the city. But he was just one of the Hall of Famers that went in. Obviously, he kind of stole the headlines with dropping that much of cash, but there were some other great athletes and coaches that
It was
went
a savvy PR move on Tulo's part, yeah.
I mean, he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's
With
doing.
due respect to Alexis Crimes, when you give $1 million, you get the first word in the headline for sure.
Quote, as an American, I wouldn't like to think that an American team would want to lose or create situations where you would want to lose. I can't even fathom. I can't go there. I can't believe that would happen. Maybe I'm naive and I'm going to read a fairy tale after this. End quote. That's Mike Krzyzewski, and the title of that fairy tale would be just the way it is right now in college/professional
I'm really
basketball.
glad we have the world's stupidest sports quote wrapped up for this year from a head coach. Who is Mike Krzyzewski to tell me what being American is when it comes to watching sports? That doesn't make any sense to me.
He's a guy that has 4 first-round picks every year as a coach.
Right, but he is the talent no matter what.
NBA teams don't get to just pick who they get on their team.
Let's set this up. Last night, actually, we're recording this on Wednesday, as we mentioned. On Tuesday night, an incredible night of college basketball in the Chicago area. Duke was there. Reporter asks, all these great freshmen right now, what do you think about teams tanking to get those guys? And that's the quote that Krzyzewski said. Now, we can get into an argument about what the situation is, but we all know what the situation is. The situation in the NBA is if you're not good, you get a better chance. You get a better chance to be in the lottery and win the lottery and get a top pick. Now, Mike Krzyzewski saying that he can't even fathom it makes me think he's been living under a rock somewhere, which I know is not the case. But he has also come out against the one and done rule, and for a long time try to not get one and done guys. He now sees what it means to not get one and done guys, and it means getting ousted in the Elite Eight every year.
He's also come out against the NBA jobs he's been offered for this very reason, because in his current position, a legendary coach at a legendary program, he could just pick whoever he gets. NBA teams can't do that. They have to tank to raise their talent level.
Well, maybe so. That's your opinion. Other people might have different opinions, but not
other people's opinions are incorrect.
Not just in the NBA. You look at the NFL. Tanking for Teddy. At what point do the Buccaneers just stop playing football? Now, as a Buccaneers fan,
did they not already stop playing football?
I'm just saying, as a Buccaneers fan, would a Buccaneers fan be okay with that? I mean, are you going to buy tickets to go to a game when you know your team is trying to lose? That doesn't sound like a situation I would want to be involved in. And if you've got your fan base not wanting to go to your home games, then you've got a bad deal, right?
Listen, bro, here's a perfect example. The Colts. The Colts had a horrible year. They didn't lose on purpose. But they ended up de facto tanking, and now their franchise has an incredibly bright future because they were able to get Andrew Luck. So whether they did it because someone got hurt or they do it on purpose, it worked to perfection.
But the situation is the on-purpose tanking that we're talking about, not teams that are just bad like the
same result.
Browns.
But it worked.
Because you've got in basketball and football, you've got, which would be obviously the two sports most immediately impacted by the draft, because unlike NHL and Major League Baseball, you go straight to the pro team. And basketball is clearly the most because there's only 5 guys on the floor at any given time. You've got one example of when that happened in what Krzyzewski would call a moral way. It happened to the Spurs, who had one really bad year and then were then able to get Tim Duncan, and it happened to the Colts, who had one bad year and were able to get Andrew Luck. Everyone else, you got to game the system a little bit, man, because I will tell you who does not enjoy being a basketball fan is Atlanta Hawks fans, who get bounced in the first or second round every year, will never get the draft pick they need to get up higher than that, and will never do well enough to give their fans a championship, or they've never even won it. They've never even won the conference.
Can't you even blame the Atlanta Hawks front office for not trying to move around in the draft then?
But how?
I don't know. Trade players, and other picks.
That's the other thing.
The NBA has more pre-draft trades than the NFL does.
Not into the top 3. You don't.
Well, that's because they decide so late with the lottery. Would you change the system if you could? If I made you the next NBA commissioner after David Stern, would you change the lottery draft system?
No, because the only way you could change it to make it to where teams didn't have to tank would be to remove a salary cap, so that teams could just sign whoever they wanted, so they don't need to worry about the draft. But if you do that, you now have a league with 4 teams in it.
Tyler?
I'm fine with the system. You just have to acknowledge that tanking's going to happen. It's not an easy call to make to just fix this, but it's the way it has to happen. You don't want to be a middling franchise like the Bucks or the Raptors that are just always on the precipice but never are bad enough to move up.
I would make the lottery fewer teams and take the odds out of it. So if you were in the bottom 5, as it were, or the bottom 8, as it were, then you would be in that lottery. But even if you were the worst team in the NBA, you would have the same opportunity as the 8th worst team in the NBA to get that first pick. So if you're in that bottom half, you're just there and you're in the lottery. But making yourself worse than the other 7 teams isn't going to end up getting you a better pick.
But then you don't reward the people who are best at tanking, JJ.
Why would I want to do that?
Because those are the people who gave up the most money in ticket sales that year. The people who tried the hardest.
As a fan of that team, I'm furious at that situation, and that's the majority of the NBA right now.
Well, hold on. No, I don't think that the majority of people.
You just said the Atlanta Hawks. If you're going to draw a line at the Atlanta Hawks and say everybody below them is in this situation, that's like half the NBA.
Well, I'm using the Atlanta Hawks as an example.
What about the Boston Celtics? They're 4-4 right now, and I just read an article the other day that said this is the worst thing Brad Stevens could do. That's a horrible way to go about your job.
No, it's not. It is the worst thing you can do, because do the Celtics want to still suck in 4 years, or do they want a chance at one of these guys who's franchise altering?
So if you're not the perennial champion, everybody should. And we're just going to turn the NBA into who's losing tonight.
No, look, I mean, it comes down to, do you want to be ask the fans of Oklahoma City if they're okay with tanking. Would you rather be a Thunder fan right now or a Raptors fan?
They wouldn't know. They're Sonics fans.
That's a pretty easy question to answer, though. I mean, joking aside, it's a pretty easy question to say, no, I'd rather have a couple top 5 picks on my team.
I'm not joking. Those Sonics fans saw them tank for somebody, and then they left. That's how bad that situation got.
I understand. I mean, the Seattle situation is obviously bad, but
it wasn't good for the fan base to be that bad on purpose.
But that's a complete because the team left. But that has nothing to do with whether.
Yeah, that's a rare circumstance.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with whether it was the right move or not to get potential Hall of Famers on your team. I mean, name me the last NBA team that won an NBA championship without at least one Hall of Famer on their roster. Do you know why you can't do it? Because it's literally never happened.
04 Pistons? 04 Pistons?
It's not
Yeah, but that's such a rare situation.
They didn't draft any of those dudes.
Obviously, they're not out of the realm. But yeah. No, I mean, the point is, especially with the new salary cap, you look at the Brooklyn Nets right now, there's 2 ways you can make your team better, right? Free agency or the draft. Because there's just not enough player development that's ever going to happen to turn a 10th place team into a championship contender. We agree on that. So it's draft
or
free
maybe
agency.
the Pacers.
Right, but it's draft or free agency.
Well, I mean, look at the Lakers. What do you guys want the Lakers to lose right now so that we can get a better pick? As I say, we Lakers fans.
Well, we're not.
That was the plan at the beginning of the season, but I think if we can't unload like Powell, I think when Kobe comes back, the team's still going to be too competitive. So I'm kind of caught in between, because I don't think we're going to win a championship this year, but I also don't think that we're going to be bad enough to where we can get a top pick.
And
so
those are the teams I'm worried about.
Limbo.
Those teams that are caught in between.
Those teams aren't tanking. The teams that are middle of the road teams aren't tanking.
If you're a Lakers fan right now and you don't think that this roster can win a championship and you're going to try to trade Powell for pieces or whatever it may be, you might want to tank if you're going to, quote, try to play the game or try to play the system.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
No, I'm not. I'm not okay with that.
Have you enjoyed watching the Lakers this year?
Actually, yes, but that's because we're only like 7 games in. Talk to me in January.
Yeah, in January, I will ask you, is this what you want being a Lakers fan to be like for the next 10 years?
It would be, and my initial response would be, that doesn't matter because it's better than watching my team lose on purpose. I would never want to watch my team lose on purpose. And you're talking to a Chargers fan who got mired in some pretty tough years before we got LT. And we wouldn't have gotten LT without those bad years. But I still wouldn't have wanted to know that the Spanoses were calling Bobby Ross and saying, hey, I know you want us a Super Bowl, but right now, lose a few games so we can get back there again. I wouldn't have gone to those football games and been behind that team if I knew that.
I wouldn't go to. I'm not going to Lakers games this year either. But that doesn't mean that I don't want a team that's worth paying money to see in the future. To make my original point, you've got the draft and you've got free agency. Currently, the draft is basically all that's open to people, because free agency with these new with the new CBA that's been put into place in the NBA. Look what happened to the Brooklyn Nets. They built through free agency this year, and it's going to cost them in luxury tax $87 million in cash. That has nothing to do with what they're paying their athletes.
Straight to the NBA.
That's what they're paying into the collective NBA fund that gets split up among the other teams, just because they're so far over the cap. That repeater tax is going to make that worse and worse and worse. That's what the Lakers used to always do.
But we
used to just always pay the luxury tax.
Don't make the Nets the example. Make the Heat the example. Make the Celtics the example. They were able to do it with trades, and they've got championships.
Well, they did it through free agency, but again, the arguably a guy who has the potential to be the greatest player of all time is not going to switch to the Atlanta Hawks next year. That happens once a generation at most.
And to specific franchises that are either historic or are in the right locations.
He was never going to the Indiana Pacers.
Not going to go help the Bucks get good.
No.
No.
That's it. That's all. There ain't no more. Another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk in the books, and we have got to get out of here because there's probably a playoff game somewhere we should be covering. It's almost going to be a guarantee over the next few weeks, and you're going to be able to follow all of it, football, volleyball, and otherwise, right here at the Press Telegram and GazetteSports.com. For everybody involved in those two newspapers and all of the coverage of sports we do here in Long Beach, for Mike, for Vince, for Tyler, for JJ, for all of the Long Beach sports fans we see in and around the city, we are going to see you in the playoff stands this week. Take care, y'all.
It feels like they're showing way more of different scenes in different commercials than normal.
You know what bothers me?
It's like, I'm going to see Out the Furnace. Stop showing me all the cool stuff that's going to happen in this movie.
I'm going to mention something new about commercials, and it's going to ruin commercials for you because you're going to see how prevalent it is. Have you noticed that every commercial has to tell someone's entire life story now? That really bothers me. Like, whether it's a Kodak commercial or a car commercial, everything you buy is for your grandkids or to record your life for your kids or whatever. And it's like, I don't need emotional... It used to be that they put women in it, like good-looking women and everything. Now it's every commercial has to be an emotional journey because of how good those Google commercials are. It really bothers me. It's manipulative.
Which Google commercials?
The Google commercials where the guy's like writing all the emails for his daughter. And then the one where the guy's Googling and then he ends up proposing to his fiancée in France.
Yeah.
They're doing those commercials, they're great, but now there's the Kodak commercial. It's like, before they sat down, one last time.
Or
just for themselves.
banking commercials are all about your grandparents and the kids after
It's
you.
funny, the guy that's taking
really
a stand
annoying.
against this is the only one at the table married with a kid.
Well, because it always gets to me emotionally because I've got this kid.
So it works, and then you hate that it's working.
It's Dumb and Dumber. He's over here crying at the Yellow Pages commercial. They're just getting to him.
It's like if I were a 16-year-old kid when the trend was that they put good-looking women in everything, and I was like, oh my gosh, maybe good-looking women will like me if I'm an underage drinker.
I have to eat that Carl's Jr. and get fat so that I can meet Mrs. AJ McCarron.
That was if we put that in the podcast, that's just free advertising for so many people we didn't want to advertise for.
Yeah, just go to Naples Ribco. They don't need fancy pull at your heartstrings. They don't need chicks.
Oh, is that an outtake? I thought that was going in the show.
No, yeah, why don't I? Okay, we'll put it in now.
Naples
Put it in.
Naples Rib.